Welcome back, everybody, to this episode of Drunk Bible Study Bonus Edition. Boy, oh boy, that chapter was... I'm like, horny,
rich.
horrifying.
It was rich. It was full of joy and horror.
I
don't know.
intense.
I mean,
Yeah.
at least like sexual joy,
Or
maybe
not, but also
maybe not,
horrible
though.
awfulness.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy. So what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about Ezekiel 24, about this cool soup that he was making, and then also about his wife dying.
Oh, yeah.
And then Emily was going to find out some more about Eugene Peterson because she was asking some questions about that in the episode. And then Dedeker, of course, we couldn't do a bonus after this episode without talking about donkey penises and emission of horses.
Always more, right?
Yeah.
Always
I
more.
I can't wait. I'm on the edge of my seat. Also, I'm standing right now, so do with that what you will. Okay, all right. So here's the deal. I tried to look up this whole thing about the soup, the cool soup that he was cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I didn't get any good answers. What I got was, well, he was a temple priest, which was actually news to me. I didn't know that was one of his jobs. But he was a temple priest.
Really? Ezekiel is?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so people were saying, well, putting all the meat in the pot was like they were doing a sacrifice. And so the point of this is that even if you put in the best, choicest meats at this point, doesn't matter. Your pot's dirty. Like you are so bad that like you can't make it up now.
Interesting. Okay.
You know, you've messed up so bad that buying me flowers isn't going to make it right. I think that's kind of the message here.
It's fair. It's fair.
That's what I got there. But in trying to look this up, what I actually ended up finding was a lot more commentary about Ezekiel's wife dying.
Oh,
geez.
Really?
Right, because he was ordered to not do any mourning stuff, and then she died right away.
Right.
Yeah, and they kind of glossed over it. It was like, and he had a wife, and she's gone now, and he had to deal with it poorly.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Boy, oh boy. The amount of reading into both Ezekiel's motivations and emotions and reading into Yahweh's motivations is abundant. Like it is hard to find. I mean, because like, sure, how would you, right? Like you go into this with the assumption of Yahweh is loving. You're going to try to find some way to find that in this, right? Same thing. You start with the assumption that Ezekiel's a good guy. You're going to try to find some way to explain this that backs that up, right? So things that came up in that was like, well, we weren't told, but maybe Ezekiel's wife was already sick or something, and this was Yahweh letting him know she's going to die now, like gave him a little bit of a heads up.
That is an interesting interpretation.
It is.
Rather than like killing her himself.
Right. Yeah. And like some people even saying the fact that he says, I'll kill her with a stroke, meaning that was a merciful that she died quickly as opposed to suffering a long time. And I'm like, again, if you're really like your goal is to make Yahweh nice, sure. You can try to find some ways, right? You can try to find some things. Now, as far as Ezekiel not mourning, it's like one possibility is she was going to die anyway. And so Yahweh tells him this and says, just hear me out. This could be some of your best performance art yet.
Gosh, got to take advantage of this.
Don't do any mourning, right? Take advantage of this. This is good press. The newspapers are going to eat this up.
Wow.
Don't mourn. Make it be a performance art piece about the fact that everything's going to go bad for all of them and they're going to be terrible and like not be able to mourn. Do that. It's going to be great. And he was like, gosh, well, it's going to be hard because I loved her so much because you said she's like the desire of my eye. And you're going to take her away. Gosh, wow, look at everyone. Ezekiel is such a loving guy, but also really obedient to Yahweh. Yahweh is also a good guy. Everyone's good. Everything's great. That's interpretation one.
Okay. Great.
Interpretation two. Variations on this, but I found one that's from a book called Seeking Ezekiel by David J. Halperin. David J. Halperin is a psychologist, and he wrote a book about psychoanalyzing Ezekiel based on the writings of this book. And
psychoanalyzing Ezekiel? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Give it to me, baby.
And he does admit psychoanalyzing someone who lived 2,500 years ago. There's some challenges, methodologically speaking.
It's tough.
Definitely.
But let's take a look. And so essentially his summation of Ezekiel is that he's a marvelously gifted yet profoundly disturbed man, tormented by inner conflicts over his sexual longings and fears.
Oh, I believe that too.
Right?
Yeah.
I
Right?
believe that. That tracks.
Wow.
So basically, he goes on and he talks about how essentially Ezekiel is dominated by this pathological dread and loathing of female sexuality. And he expresses this in symbolic language of his dreams, such as the temple being polluted by idolatry, and in his allegory of the horrors of Israel and Jerusalem. So like the stuff that we just read.
I thought that was The Rock who was doing this, and then he was just saying it.
Well,
We've brought this up before, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole question. Is like, who's actually saying this?
Where's the chicken and where's the egg?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Ezekiel or is it Yahweh? Ezekiel says it's Yahweh, but we only have Ezekiel's word for it. So, and it's maybe not even Ezekiel, but maybe someone else who wrote it down later.
Totally.
Right? There's like layers of we don't know, right? Because Yahweh didn't write the book himself.
Yeah.
And then also kind of goes on to talk about Ezekiel's kind of weird relationship to male figures as well, including Yahweh, and kind of struggling with this. What I thought was interesting was sort of the message that he puts, and this is just based on the description from the Penn State University Press, which published this book. And it says, the sexual pathology that he attributes to Ezekiel has afflicted humanity for most of its history, tainting the relationships of men and women the world over. Ezekiel's powerful influence on posterity has done its part in strengthening the grip of this pathology. By understanding Ezekiel, people may come to a better understanding of his sickness within themselves and thus eventually come to find healing.
Okay.
So we did try to find a silver lining to Ezekiel of like, what if the message of Ezekiel is not to do as Ezekiel did or said, but to learn from just how sick he was in his, right? Like in his psychology toward women and his own sexuality and stuff, that we could learn from that and all heal from it. So it's like, wow, two very different ends of the spectrum of how people view Ezekiel.
That's fascinating though.
Yeah, it was really interesting.
Wow.
I think that's always what I'm wondering about these people who see God in such a way that causes them to like proclaim all of these amazing, outlandish things and talk about like, you know, what's happening around them in this really negative fashion and saying that God's going to kill everyone. But then he kind of does. So he is prophesying. I don't know. It's interesting.
That's one other thing I learned. I learned a term that is vaticinium ex eventu.
Oh,
okay.
And it's a term for a prophecy that was actually written down after the fact.
Yeah.
Oh.
I feel like that's probably happened a lot.
Got it.
At this point.
I'm sure we've come across it a ton, right? It gets mentioned.
I knew that was going to happen.
Right. It gets mentioned a ton in talking about biblical writings as well as Babylonian writings, like all sorts of stuff, where it's like, sure, maybe the person we're attributing this prophecy to lived before the event, but the people writing it lived after the event. And so we can't trust the writing of it. So vaticinium ex eventu is attributed to Ezekiel quite a bit.
Goodness.
Wow. All righty. It's pretty incredible. Well, our friend Eugene Holland Peterson.
Holland.
What a name.
What a man. Holland.
Wow.
Yeah. He was born on November 6th, 1932, and he died not that long ago, October 22nd, 2018.
Yeah.
So he would have been 90 next year. And
he died right before we started Drunk Bible Study.
Man.
It's true. Maybe we did it as a love letter to Eugene in some way.
I like that. This is the whole show is our homage to Eugene.
Exactly. So he got a philosophy degree from Seattle Pacific University, and then also a Bachelor of Sacred Theology degree from New York Theological Seminary, and then finally a degree in Semitic languages from Johns Hopkins University. So he also founded Christ Our King Presbyterian Church in Bel Air, Maryland, and he served there for 29 years before retiring in 91. And then he became a professor of spiritual theology at Regent College in Vancouver from 1992 to 1998. And then after all that, he decided to go to Montana and just like write.
Montana.
So that's fun.
So writing the message happened after all of that?
Yes. So, okay.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he's a pastor and then a professor and then wrote this.
I believe, yes. So,
And then a poet.
And then a poet, yes.
Exactly. And then a poet, yeah.
Pastor, professor, and poet.
The Eugene Peterson story.
Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy.
Yes, exactly. Or wait, okay, no, I'm wrong. It says in 93. So let me go through this. Let me go through this in terms of the message. So he, let's see, it says 8 years after 1982. So that means in 1990, he agreed to translate 10 chapters of the Gospel according to Matthew, but stopped after translating 4. He's like, it was as bad as I thought it was going to be. It was just awful. It was wooden, stilted, and contrived. Believing the task futile, he skipped to the Sermon on the Mount. I don't know what this is, but I feel like I've heard those words together before. He said that he skipped there just to have fun, and then something happened. I found my voice.
Oh.
And millions of readers agreed. And so in 93, he released the New Testament portion of the message. So in 93, that happened. And then in 2002, it said, then he released the entirety, the Old and the New Testament, in the summer of 2002. So yes, the entire thing was after he had left, being a professor and a pastor and all that stuff.
This helps my understanding a little bit because I was confused about the timeline because I remember being in college when the message was like a thing.
There you go. That's why, right?
Yeah. Right. And I was in college from 2001 to 2005.
Perfect.
So I was like, but then when I heard, but I think I saw somewhere that it came out in 93 and I was like, wait, what?
So that was
long?
only,
that was,
the New Testament portion.
That makes sense. Okay.
So it took 10 years. And yes, it says after retiring from the 29-year pastorate at Christ Our King Presbyterian Church. So yeah, that's really incredible. However, just so everyone knows, this guy wrote like 45 books. This is just one of them.
Goodness.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really, really impressive.
Are the other ones all commentaries or like what?
Well, okay, let me read some. So, a year with the Psalms, 365 meditations and prayers. That sounds like the Stoicism book that I read. Growing up in Christ, a guide for families with adolescents. 5 smooth stones for pastoral work. No idea what that is. The Contemplative Pastor. Returning to the art of spiritual direction. So stuff like that. It's not necessarily, kind of commentaries. Yeah. The Christmas Troll. I would love to read that.
Oh my gosh. We have to do a bonus at some point reading the Christmas Troll.
Yeah, that's our little holiday bonus.
That's good. Let me look into that and I'll make a note of that so we can look into it.
Wow. Yeah, 2004 was when that.
We have to read the full title of this book, which is The Christmas Troll, sometimes God's best gifts are the most... God, it's so long that it's even cutting it off in my window.
It doesn't,
most unexpected.
Yes.
Oh, I say, okay, the most unexpected. Yeah, wow. This says, eat this book, a conversation in the art of spiritual reading. Wow.
Whoa.
Wow. So, yeah, basically, I will say that he received some criticism for it, but he also says that the message is unlike any of his other books and articles. It doesn't feel like my book. Says the author who returned to, whatever. I was a servant to the text. It's a strange thing, really. The thing I'm best known for is the thing I feel least identified with. That's very interesting and understandable. I mean, he really just did a translation, but he did want to make it more understandable to everyone. And because he knew he had a degree in languages, in Semitic languages, that was how he was able to read it from Greek, I guess is what he said, which is nuts. and then
That makes sense,
translate
though.
it from there.
I feel like that's like a prerequisite if you're going to do a translation. You've got to know Greek and Aramaic and shit to have any basis to say, yes, this is legit. Right?
Yeah. So, okay, the stated goal of the message was to make the original meaning more understandable and accessible to the modern reader. Peterson said, when Paul of Tarsus wrote a letter, the people who received it understood it instantly. When the prophet Isaiah preached a sermon, I can't imagine that people went to the library to figure it out. That was the basic premise under which I worked. I began with the New Testament in the Greek, a rough and jagged language, not so grammatically clean. I just typed out a page the way I thought it would have sounded to the Galatians. Or Galatians?
Galatians.
Galatians. Okay, yes.
You got it.
Yeah. Wow. So that's really fascinating. I will say he did have a wife, Jan Peterson, who died in 2019. And yeah, she sounded like a lovely lady. They were together for, what does this say, like 60 years or something?
Wow.
Like a really, married 60 years. So she was also on the Regent, the Regent College staff. And, all of it, they loved God, obviously. So that was cool. It does say that, during his final days, it was apparent that he was navigating the thin and sacred space between heaven and earth. We overheard him speaking to people we can only presume were welcoming him into paradise. There may have even been a time or two when he accessed his Pentecostal roots and spoke in tongues as well. Whoa.
Okay. Wow.
I'd believe it.
Yeah. And he died of congested heart failure. But anyways, I mean, based on what all this says, he sounds like a cool dude. He's, just a white-haired man and a white-haired lady. And and it's fascinating that he did so much other stuff besides this.
Mm-hmm.
And then yet, as he said, this is by far the thing that he's going to be most known for. And he certainly is.
Yeah, no question about that.
Yeah, for sure.
Within our Drunk Bible Study community. Yeah.
Wow. Amazing.
Oh boy. Well, it's time, my friends.
Okay. It's time for the pee.
My dear friends.
The peen.
It's time for the pee.
Gosh. Oh gosh.
The peeny weenie.
This led me down a really interesting rabbit hole.
Oh yeah.
So I'm going to start with, I just started looking at what different translations have to say. So specifically the verses Ezekiel 23:20. The NIV, as we read in the main episode, there she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys and whose emission was like that of horses. Most of the other translations stick to that same theme. I did like the contemporary English version says, she eagerly wanted to go to bed with Egyptian men who were famous for their sexual powers.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Hot.
Yeah.
I also liked Young's literal translation. And she doteth on their paramours, whose flesh is the flesh of asses, and the issue of horses, their issue. You know horses? You know horse cum? You know?
Everyone knows that.
That's what it was like.
It's great.
Totally like that.
I'm sorry. I don't, how...
Where are you going with this, Sam?
Horses, I don't think that they're just like regularly coming all over the place for people to see it.
But these are like an agrarian people, right? Where they have to do their own animal husbandry. And so...
I suppose, yeah.
So they all know.
It's
like we can relate to that.
Yeah. I guess, when you've seen a horse artificially inseminated.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, they do. Yeah. All right. I've seen something like this. Okay, go on.
So most of the explanations that I found in Christian blogs, it's pretty much the same where they're like, oh yeah, it's very lewd and very rude and very explicit, but it's meant to be that way because it's supposed to shock, it's supposed to shock the men that we're prophesying to. It's supposed to be disgusting. It's gross. It's a gross thing that we're reading this metaphor about how upset and disgusted God is by the terrible things that his metaphorical wives are doing. Specifically in this Christian blog from connectusfund.org, it says, the lewd imagery was chosen for a reason. God is like a jealous husband, and our forsaking of him or idols is as disgraceful and gross as this image portrays.
Wow.
Huh.
Wow.
Now, on the Hermeneutic Stack Exchange,
yes.
Okay, good.
Someone did say, why the vulgarity in Ezekiel 23:20?
Yeah, why indeed?
Yeah.
And here's where the explanation behind this starts to get a little bit dark. I will warn you.
Okay.
It's not gonna get any more graphic or intense than we've already covered in the Bible here.
Sure.
Right.
But in the hermeneutic stack exchange, the person who asked that question, there's only one response, and where the person lays out like, yeah, it's a metaphor. This is what it means. Samaria, Israel, yada, 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 yada. And then at the end, they're like, yeah, so if you imagine like a jealous husband whose wife has just cheated on him one too many times, and then he flies into a rage and very justly throws a bunch of names and profanity at her. That's why.
And so very it's like, justly? Okay, bye.
Yes, like italicized also, very justly goes to this place of verbal abuse. That's like what God is doing, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's okay. Now,
yeah, it's very similar to the justifications I was coming across for
yeah.
Okay.
Now, I did find an interesting book called Sexual and Marital Metaphors in Hosea, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and Ezekiel by Sharon Moten Mumby.
Okay.
This is published by Oxford.
I'm sure there's a lot to say on this topic.
Lot to say. Now, some really interesting quotes out of this book that actually look at this in a much more critical lens. So I'm going to read this quote. The depiction of a holibah's desire in terms of the size, in parentheses, animal-like, of, the male members seems not just an example of mere misnaming a female experience, but an actual distortion of it. Instead of reflecting female desire, this depiction betrays male obsession.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that is really interesting.
Yeah. Tracks with the psychoanalytic approach to Ezekiel.
It tracks, and it tracks exactly what still happens today, which is still this kind of sense of male sexual figures that are marketed to straight women are not really what straight women want. It's more what men are obsessed with.
Right.
Like this sense of, men want the super, super oily beefcake. That's what ladies are attracted to.
I see. That's a really good point. Fascinating.
Those are the images we're going to put out there when really that's more of a male power fantasy. And I guess this same thing of like, his dick is like a donkey's and he's just like coming buckets for days. That's what turns women on, right?
Fascinating.
And not that I want to kink shame anybody, that does turn some women on, but I think speaking in more broad strokes, it's obviously it's like
it's
not
just
from
one flavor of many 31
to many flavors.
50,000 flavors that are out there.
I like how Baskin Robbins is your starting point. You're like from 31 to some number higher than that.
Yeah.
Now here's another interesting. So I found this site, and I think I found some more people who are like our people. I actually already sent them a message inviting them on the podcast.
Oh,
made that executive decision.
Excellent. Okay.
This is for some people who made a game called A Game for Good Christians.
Okay.
And it's basically like a Christian take on Cards Against Humanity, but very much in the DBS flavor. It seems like very much their mission statement is we're just using stuff straight out of the Bible. And if you're offended by that, then you need to check yourself before you wreck yourself. And but we're not here to like make fun of it. We're not trying to tear it down. We're just trying to be funny, essentially.
Yeah, right. I love that.
And they actually, on the site, it's not just about the game. They have a bunch of really, really interesting blog posts. And so I'm going to read you a quote here. So more than this, the female body is used to conjure up for Ezekiel's audience images of dread, chaos, anarchy, and evil. Some have gone as far as calling Ezekiel's language pornographic or porno prophetic, which I thought was clever.
Porno prophetic is such a good...
Porno prophetic?
Oh,
that's
wow.
Beautiful.
That was a good band name. Right. Yes. Which is valid as Ezekiel's use of women in his metaphors contains, quote, the preservation of male domination through a denial or misnaming of female experience, which is considered a distinguishing feature of pornography. And they go on to list all the stuff that we've encountered before about Ezekiel obsessing over women's menstrual cycles and their breasts being fondled, and
just so much breast talk in this
so much
chapter
stuff, but they go on to say, and so they're saying that, obviously this is a really problematic depiction of women where it's both this combination of they want sex and they're taking pleasure in sex, but it's bad that they're doing that, but also they're like victims of assault, but also maybe because they were victims of assault, they still deserved it because they were adulterous. And what I really love is they kind of end on this note of saying, one of the difficulties with the text is that Ezekiel's words only work if God is painted in an abusive light, period.
Yes.
And
you're
like,
thank you.
Yes,
thank you.
That's kind of where we've landed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, hey, I think we'd get along.
Yeah. You want to...
It seems like their game actually I think would be pretty fun. That
should
could
check
be
that out. Yeah.
Totes.
They claim that also you can have a wide variety of experience with the Bible. to still have fun
I mean,
with the game. So
We should pick up that game and bring it to the family for the holidays.
oh, great!
oh, yeah.
That'll be great.
Viewer, discretion is advised, but yeah.
I did want to say too that I found on YouTube when I was looking up my stuff about Ezekiel, I found that there are these posts on YouTube that's called the New International Version Dramatized Audio Bible.
Oh
that
boy!
I think is all computer-generated voice of a
No.
man in a very monotone way reading the Bible.
Oh, no.
So dramatized is generous.
Wow.
But it's all the NIV. And I found the section that's, Ezekiel 23. Because I looked it up for 24 first. And I was like, oh man, I want to hear this for 23 with these penises.
Oh, are you going to play it?
Do you want to hear it? Do you want to hear it?
I would love to hear it.
I do. Yeah. You really built it up.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
Yet she became more and more promiscuous as she recalled the days of her youth when she was a prostitute in Egypt. There she lusted after her lovers, whose genitals were like those of donkeys, and whose emission was like that of horses.
I like the music.
So you
in the
longed
background.
for the lewdness of your youth, when in Egypt your bosom was caressed, and your young breasts fondled.
Your bosom.
Yeah.
Bosom.
It's a lot of good
Bosom.
stuff going on there.
He's just really intense about it.
And then the comments. The first number one comment is so deep. I'm touched. It's just great. But a lot of the comments were things like this one person said, how could all this porn in the Bible? That's not holy.
How could all this porn? How could all this porn in the Bible?
And then someone tried to... Oh, no, I see. And then someone
Okay.
responded to that and said, can you let kids read this porno verses, lol? Why would a holy book describe a sexual part details for the people? and then they write out the quote.
What? Who did a bot write this?
I do like to imagine this is all bots all the time. Just
Yeah.
the audiobook was bots, the people commenting are bots, that we've reached that level of the singularity where like bots are having moral arguments with each other about porn in the
It's
Bible.
really good.
I still am. I'm way back towards the beginning of what you were talking about, Jace, and I just keep thinking of like a band jumping up on stage and being like, "We are porno prophetic. Thank you, Los Angeles." Just jumping.
Porno prophetic is a really good...
Or maybe we are the porno prophets.
Porno prophets.
Porno prophets is
We're the
good.
That would be difficult to say. Yeah.
Well, that's all I got. That's what I got for you.
That's
Amazing.
beautiful.
Can I leave you with one last comment from this?
Please.
This one just says, wow, porno by God.
How do you know if you're pagante? Oh, God. Okay.
All right,
Wow.
folks. Well, thank you for... I was going to say thank you for coming on this journey.
Oh, boy.
As it were.
Thank you
As
for
it
joining us.
were.
We hope that you'll still join us after today.
Listener discretion is advised.
Yes.
At all
and we will
times.
see y'all around. Have a good week.